Hi class, my name is Heather Curley and I'm here to present my project to you. When I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do for this program, I started to think of a group of individuals that I believe has a barrier to equality and human dignity, and that group of people that I would like to work with and set up a program with is the LGBTQ community. For those of you that don't know, that is the gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer community. And I wanted to work with this group, and at first I wanted to work with this group in order to help them obtain same-sex marriage. But another person in the class was doing that project, so I started to think of what would be another group that I could work with. And I started to think of a group of people that are often overlooked in this community, and that is the youth. And I started to think about the LGBTQ youth out there, the ones that are under 18, who are coming out to their parents and whose parents don't accept them and they are displaced from their homes. So I wanted to really work with homeless LGBTQ youth, because I feel like they're overlooked, and I feel like there's a lot that needs to be done with this community that we're just not doing. My passion in regards to social work is the LGBTQ community. It is a community that I am a part of, so it is like they're my people, they're my community, they're a group of people that I want to always work with because my heart's in that. That's really in life who I want to work with, and especially the youth, because when I came out as a youth, I went through a very hard time. I was very depressed, I had anxiety. My parents didn't accept it at first, they eventually did, but it was a rough couple years. Luckily, I was never kicked out. My parents always loved me. They just, they had a hard time accepting it. They didn't want me to be discriminated against. They didn't want me to be bullied. They didn't want me to have a tougher time in life, which are all serious concerns because this is something that happens in this community. But I have heard a lot of stories about LGBTQ teens that have been kicked out of their homes, that are homeless and on the street. And this population is at risk for many, many things. They're not getting the education that they should be getting as youth because they're on the streets, they're not going to school, they're not employed, they're not being set up for college. They're basically a lost group of youth that are just out in the streets who nobody is taking care of. So I would like to work with these youth in my program. My main objective is to provide them with a safe place to live, so they're not being discriminated against, they're not being bullied against. A safe zone is very, very important to these youth. They should feel as though that they have a place to be themselves and not be discriminated against or hurt for it. So that's the major objective of this program. Another objective of this program is to make sure that they are being able to get the same education and as the rest of the youth in the straight community, that they have an equal opportunity. So I look at this program as a shelter, but also as a drop-in center for youth. So it wouldn't just be for youth to live there, it would also be a place for youth to drop in, to get counseling, to work on their schoolwork, to join support groups. And for those youth that are displaced, that don't have a place to stay, they would be in a shelter there. They would be able to live there until they're 18. But the primary goal would be reunification. It would be to work with the families and help them learn to accept their children and to help them reunite and have their kids come back home, because we wouldn't want to see them living at the shelter for their whole entire time until they turn 18. The goal would be to have them come back and live with their families. If that's not possible for them to live with their parents, maybe we could set them up with another family member that would have them come into their home. If that's not possible, maybe we could work with LGBTQ adults that would foster these youth until they're 18. So it would be a short-term program for youth to live in, and then we would set them up and reunify them with their parents, another family member, or with foster parents. But while they're living with us, we would help them go to school, if that's what their goal is, to finish their education, or to help them with employment or to help them go to college. Funding would probably be difficult, but hopefully we could work with the state. In Rhode Island, there's DCYF, and maybe that they would provide funding for these youth since they are displaced from their homes. It would be difficult because the homeless youth would have to have their parents probably relinquish their rights if they're not allowed to come back home, or their parents would at least give informed consent for them to live there. So it would be a little tricky to get ducks lined up, I guess, and to make this happen, but I believe we could. I would start off small. I would want to work in my home state. I would want to work in the urban area of Providence, and eventually go from there and set up more shelters, or have one big shelter in Providence. And I would also want to form an alliance with the other GLBTQ groups, or LGBTQ groups, sorry, and work with them to form an alliance to help them see that there's a community out there. That would be the biggest goal, is to let them know, these youth that are displaced, there is a community here, they care about you, and they're here for you, and they support you. So that would be a major, major goal of this program. And it would also be the goal to work with the schools and have them on board with this shelter, and help them promote acceptance and tolerance in their schools, because I don't think there's a lot of acceptance and tolerance in the schools for LGBTQ youth. And I keep saying the word shelter, and as I say the word shelter, I don't really like the word shelter, but it would mainly be a community center, a drop-in center with beds for youth that are displaced from their homes and living on the streets. And it would be to reduce the risk of kids being homeless. It would be to reduce the risk of them turning to drugs and alcohol. It would reduce the risk of them turning to unprotected sex and dangerous behavior, because there's a lot of LGBTQ youth on the streets that engage in survival methods. They are prostituting themselves, selling drugs. They're doing whatever they can to make it on the streets, and we don't want to see that happen anymore. We want to see these youth surviving and thriving. So that's my program. It was kind of hard to get it all under control in a short amount of weeks, but I think I have a good handle on what I would like to see happen, and I would like to employ the empowerment method, because I would like to make sure that these kids know that people are advocating for them, and eventually they would advocate for themselves, and they would feel better about themselves and know that there is a group of people in their community out there that care about them, and that they will be able to survive and thrive instead of living on the streets, and they would be able to be somewhere where they can focus on their school and employment instead of focusing on all the turmoil that's happening at home or out on the streets. So thank you very much for listening to this. I hope that you liked my project, and please give me feedback. Thank you.